Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. I want to share with you a few things being discussed in the XRP community having to do with things on the legal front in the SEC v. Ripple case, including the fact that Attorney John Deaton has stated that he thinks it's possible that Ripple may just end up with a $250 million fine. He thinks that's possible. And of course, there is an if to that, so I'm going to provide what he stated in full context. But, the idea of there being ultimately some sort of fine and then, Ripple being allowed to proceed with business as usual, as it was before the SEC just made a complete mess of everything. The idea of that happening seems pretty damn likely to me at this point, having been following this case for over 2 years. I mean, fine, maybe Ripple gets the shaft and then they move out of the United States. And maybe even if that happens, there's still some sort of clarity for XRP holders. But I wouldn't be surprised if the judge rules that there was some sort of, even though, and I say this on understanding that the SEC did not cite any specific transactions where they're supposed to, but still I could see a path forward where Judge Torres in this case says, well, these transactions, they look like offerings, because, you could even setting aside the sales, just making an offer, what is, the technical definition of an offer, even that's illegal. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of fine. Not that I'm saying there should be or that I want there to be. I'm just saying if that's the outcome, wouldn't be surprised. But even so, what's most probable? Maybe just a fine and then Ripple's able to conduct business as usual and XRP holders get clarity. And that's a lot of money, 250. That's a lot of cheddar right there, $250 million. Good thing Ripple's got over $1 billion in the bank. Literally, they've stated that, $1 billion in the bank. But the inflation eating that away, but still. Anyway, before going further, though, I do want to be clear. I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say, all right? I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so there's a story, and I covered this yesterday, actually, but there's stuff that, we're going to share to expand upon this because even David Schwartz jumped into a conversation that stemmed from this. There was a tweet by Stuart Alderati, who is Ripple's chief legal officer. And in case you missed it, it was just yesterday, he tweeted out, the SEC has lost 4 of its last 5 cases in the Supreme Court, thanks to the few that had the courage and resources to fight back against the SEC's bullying and clinging to stretch legal positions that were not faithful to the law. Yeah, and so I made the point yesterday that it's just the case that even if you have the fortitude and the mental wherewithal to attack the SEC, the question is, do you have the war chest? Do you have the money? And for most firms out, the answer is no. So the SEC just gets what it wants, and there's a lot of acquiescing, tons of settlements, which is repulsive. But that's another reason that I'm very thankful that that in this case Ripple's doing what they're doing, because if it comes to it, this thing's going to the freaking Supreme Court, and I don't think that's the most probable outcome, but it might. And Ripple absolutely has the cojones and the war chest to make that happen. So if they don't get favorable rulings in district court and then at the appellate level, you better believe it's going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court doesn't have to accept every case that's thrown its way, but I firmly believe they'd accept this one because it has to do with government overreach, and the makeup of the Supreme Court currently does not have a lot of tolerance for government overreach, and that's clearly what this is. And so XRP community member Stefan retweeted that and wrote, if you ask me, all of these Stuart Alderati's threatening gestures, have one main goal: to tell Gary Gensler to better settle on Ripple's terms and give them a unique advantage in clarity over all others, or they will take away his jurisdiction over crypto, which I think is actually a fair enough point. So a couple things on this. If there is no settlement and Ripple wins, XRP will have a unique advantage in the market. So that's one way. If there's no settlement and Ripple wins, XRP would just have a unique advantage in the market because there would be legal clarity for it. Now, XRP could also have a unique advantage in crypto markets if there's favorable settlement terms for Ripple. So there's a couple ways that could go down. But in terms of what the messaging that we continue to see from top Ripple officials, from Stuart Alderati and even Brad Garlinghouse himself. To what degree it's coordinated behind the scenes, I can't say. I don't think it's even necessary that they'd have to necessarily have some sort of coordination. but they're on the same page. So whatever they're tweeting, even if they're not getting, it's not like Brad Garlinghouse is approving, macromanaging to the level where he's approving Stuart Alderati's tweets. I'm not insinuating that. No. I'm just saying that they're all on the same page. And to me, and so from a messaging perspective, they're putting out what they're putting out, but it shows that they're operating from a position of strength, and that is important when it comes to cases. It's just a piece of the puzzle. I'm not saying it's the most important piece, but it's a thing to consider. And attorney Bill Morgan of the XRP community is thinking the same thing. He retweeted that from Stefan Huber and wrote, "You are correct in my opinion. Reaching a settlement in a hotly contested case against a tough opponent requires the application of unrelenting pressure. This includes messaging." Yeah, and so you gotta imagine, like, these SEC asshat pricks, these stupid attorneys. That, I mean, they're not actually stupid; they're just terrible people. But you gotta imagine, like, as this is obviously gone in Ripple's favor, all the pretrial stuff anyway that we can see, it's continued to go in the favor. You gotta imagine that they're starting to sweat a little bit, at least to some degree. And so that, and then these other little things, because they're still humans technically. They're still humans. I got to say technically again, but so you got to imagine that every little thing adds up. If you're a human, every little thing you see adds up. If they felt like they were flying high and then they saw this from Stuart Alderati, maybe it wouldn't have as big an impact. But it's every little piece of the puzzle. So I get what Attorney Morgan's stating here, and I think that actually does make sense. But not everybody agrees on everything that Stefan Huber said. There's somebody who goes by the name The Future Is Here who wrote, "No unique advantage. I believe that's why Ripple hasn't settled yet. They want a level playing field." And everybody's entitled to their opinion, and he could be right, but I think that, just my personal opinion, I think that Stefan Huber is right. And here's what he had to say. He wrote, and this is where David Schwartz jumped in too, but Stefan Huber retweeted that and said, "Sorry, I absolutely, completely disagree. They are a for-profit company. If they can get a unique advantage, they will take it any day. They will not go to the SCOTUS, that's Supreme Court of the United States, for Elbow Joe. Nope." And I actually agree with that because, look, two things can be true at once, and they most certainly are here. Ripple, if presented with a situation that would give them an advantage over competitors, of course they're going to take that. Why wouldn't they take? And in this case, they're forced into a position where they may end up with this advantage because the SEC sued them, and as a result, there will be clarity surrounding XRP. So they were forced into a position where they'd have this advantage. It's not even that they were even seeking it. They're just put into this position. So yes, of course they would want that. That would be desirable for Ripple. It's good for XRP holders too, of course, but that would certainly be good for Ripple. So I don't think it's the case that they're, not settling purely because they want some sort of level playing field. Now, that being said, this guy isn't entirely wrong. The Future Is Here is not entirely wrong, because I certainly think it's clear. It's been articulated by David Schwartz so many times, and he actually did it again here, that a level playing field is of the utmost importance, which we don't have in crypto today, frankly. But it's also important that we have all sorts of winners out there, because you want a bigger crypto pie, and then Ripple can get their piece of that, basically. Because if you just have, failure after failure after failure, and you never get a home run in the crypto asset class in the space, how is that good for Ripple? We want broader adoption of crypto so that Ripple can do what they're doing, and it's more likely that it'll be accepted from a regulatory perspective and culturally around the world. So both things are true at once. That Ripple, yes, would be happy to have a sort of advantage, but of course they understand the importance of having a bigger crypto pie. So that's how I look at it. And then XRP community member Jaffe, whose name I'm probably accidentally butchering, my apologies, friend, wrote to Stefan Huber and said, "They have a fiduciary responsibility towards their own company, not a responsibility over all crypto. Who is this guy?" And this is where David Schwartz just jumped in, and he said, "The thing is, we can't succeed in the industry if, I'm sorry, let me repeat that. The thing is, we can't succeed if the industry doesn't succeed. A world where, say, Twitter is the only successful internet company is unimaginable. I expect we will always prefer wins to everyone in the space if we can." Yeah, so imagine if Twitter were the only internet company, there would be no one on Twitter, basically. Because like, the fact that the internet existed and other stuff was going on led to the possibility where people would ultimately end up on Twitter. Similarly, if you have a thriving crypto ecosystem, That is what's going to be a major piece in Ripple's success in positioning XRP as a bridge currency. So yes, of course, be happy about your win if it comes and you get that a competitive edge and there's regulatory certainty, but also keep rooting like they've been doing for a more broadly adopted world of crypto. And they have been doing that, by the way. And then Jaffe wrote back, he said, thanks for the response. Wasn't looking to paint Ripple as an unfeeling evil corporate overlord, only that the priority is Ripple first and hopefully everyone else if the cost is right. To which David Schwartz said, yeah, I think that's fair to say. I hope we don't get into a position where we're tempted to walk through a door and slam it shut behind us. But, of course, I can't promise we won't. Yeah, and that's fair enough, too, because David Schwartz isn't in charge of that. but everything that he said is correct in terms of, it's important to have a bigger piece of CryptoPot. You can see everything that he's been getting at here. So anyway, that's what T thinks, and I shared my perspective on it. You guys can tell me what you think. But then there's also this. My fellow XRP YouTuber, the digital asset investor, tagged John Deaton. He said, hey, John, is it possible for there to be a SEC v. Ripple partial settlement and partial appeal, which could end up in the Supreme Court? And this is where Attorney Deaton comes in and says what he thinks might be possible. It's not guaranteed, but he thinks might be possible. And it could be a big old fine. And he says, in my opinion, Ripple would pay $100 to $250 million in a settlement if the SEC agreed publicly that current and future sales of XRP are not securities. The SEC is not going to agree to that in the middle of its war versus crypto. Judge Torres could provide clarity on secondary sales, which isn't appealed. Yeah, so I think that makes all the sense in the world. Unfortunately, the SEC, frankly, it's this coordinated attack. I was talking about this literally just yesterday. There are tons of government agencies, and it comes from the White House on down to the Biden administration. It's certainly the case. It's a provable case. It's a coordinated effort. All sorts of government agencies cracking down on crypto, and the SEC is a big part of that for sure. But do you think in the midst of this, the SEC is likely to capitulate on anything? It's possible. I don't think it's the most probable thing, do you? So I think what Attorney Deaton is saying here makes a lot of sense. So that's why he says, if this happened, okay, $250 million settlement, but is that likely? Probably not in the middle of this war, against crypto. So we'll see what happens. And then, of course, as far as secondary sales goes, I'm really looking forward to seeing that being addressed by Judge Torres. And I'd be surprised if she didn't address that in her initial conclusion, however she decides, like assuming she rules in favor of one of the motions for summary judgment, either for SEC or Ripple. I'd be surprised if she didn't have something to say about secondary market sales, even though in the SEC v. Library case there was nothing there about it. There was that lack of clarity. Judge Torres has taken a notable interest in all of the amicus briefs that have been filed, all the third parties that would be impacted on a ruling. I think she gets it. I think she cares. She understands there's over 75,000 XRP holders that have signed up to be a part of this with Attorney John Deaton. So I would imagine that she would be putting something in that initial document, whatever she writes up, assuming there's a conclusion there, something to do with secondary sales. And if she does, I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to be very good for XRP holders, even if Ripple loses technically. So we'll just have to sit back and see, but it's all coming soon. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.